How's it going, everyone? Lately, there has been a significant increase in complaints that survivors in particular are giving up at the drop of a needle. Like, if anything goes wrong, they're just immediately abandoning the match by giving up on hook. So today we're going to discuss exactly why this is happening in the first place, what can be done to stop it, and of course, why 99% of it is behavior's fault for design choices that are actually insane and completely unprecedented in the entire gaming industry. Now, I've already made a video about how to resolve the DC issue in the game, so I don't want to retread over that specifically. Instead, we are focusing on players that give up on hook, go AFK, and intentionally throw matches. Now, this is a multi-layered cake. For one, survivors can bypass the DC penalty by giving up on hook. That's obviously the primary issue. So how do we stop players from giving up on hook? Let's start here. Now, I've seen this simple idea multiple times already. Just don't let survivors attempt to pull themselves off of the hook until there's about 10 seconds left on their first hook state. They get 70 seconds on the hook right now. That would mean that they have to wait 1 minute before they can give up. This is easily the best of both worlds. It keeps the feature in the game, but restricts it in a way that makes it serve its intended purpose as a last chance mechanic. So that's pretty simple. It's kind of pathetic that it hasn't actually been implemented yet, if I'm honest. Now, as far as survivors going AFK or intentionally throwing matches by running to the killer, etc., this behavior is often a symptom of a failed attempt to give up on hook, right? The survivor maybe pulls themselves to second stage, but they get unhooked by a teammate before they can actually die. So they go AFK or they run to the killer out of spite that their teammate denied them an exit to the match. So first of all, it's important to accept that this problem can never be fixed 100%. However, that does not merit the excuse not to try to mitigate it so that it happens as rarely as possible. So mitigation, how do we reduce it after fixing the giving up on hook option? Well, to answer that, we need to take a look at all the reasons this is happening in the first place, right? For example, recently, behavior removed the ability to DPIP. So no matter how poorly you play, or even if you outright DC from the game, there is no DPIP. When this was announced, I immediately recognized it would be problematic. But here's the thing. I kind of like the fact that you can't DPIP. It's a frivolous mechanic anyway, and it's just there for blood points at this point. But nonetheless, this has had a noticeable impact on how often players are willing to give up. Before, they wanted to stay in the game so they wouldn't lose their pips. That's just a fact. So simple solution, an outright DC leaving the game earns a DPIP, and players who earn under 3,000 points also get a DPIP. There's basically no reason anyone should ever score lower than that unless they were literally throwing the match, with like extremely rare exceptions. So that's about the best way we can mitigate that specific behavior. Next, let's quickly talk about archive challenges. Now, this one is a little more tricky. Anytime a new tome releases, there's a big spike in players abandoning matches. That's because they're trying to earn challenges that can sometimes be frustrating and people have a limited time to play, right? Like if they see a challenge that is to stun a killer 2 times in a single match with a pallet, and they play against a nemesis who never gets pallet stunned, then they're going to feel like the match is a waste of time because they'll never get their challenge done. So they may as well go to the next game real quick, right? That's the psychology behind it. So the only thing that can really be done here is to try to have some foresight with archive challenges that might reduce this line of thinking. Overall, this is a pretty minor one, but it is still one of the issues, so I felt it was worth addressing. Now let's get on to the meat of the overarching big issue here and why it's really behavior's fault. Over the past few years, there has been a pretty heavy and noticeable shift in the killer design to make them much more lethal in a chase. Now, I already have a video going into the history of that and how a lot of it is rooted in bad map design that you can watch here, but specifically today we're going to talk about the elephant in the room. These killers are being designed and redesigned to be able to compete against strong survival with friends, right? It's pretty obvious that the modern killer design and buffs are pretty overkill for solo queue teams. And I just find it crazy and honestly unprecedented, by the way, in the entire gaming industry that one of the most popular games in existence today is being balanced and designed around a third-party feature that's not even available in the vanilla game, which is of course voice chat. I've truly never seen anything like this before, and it kind of shows as a testament how unwilling behavior is to accept the inconvenient truth that balancing the game for both solo queue survivors and survive with friends is impossible. And not just a little bit impossible, but impossible by a mile. It's not even close. Voice chat would not do anything if they added it to DBD. TCM proved this. Seeing builds before matches wouldn't help either, even possibly causing more problems than it helps with lobby dodging and all of that, and a ping system would only slightly move the dial. So it's this design desperation to try to make the game function for both groups of players that is leading to heavy amounts of frustration and contributing significantly to this go next culture. And we kind of have to consider, what is the breaking point here? How lethal do we continue to design killers, buff killers, etc. to be able to deal with Swifts, which currently at the highest level, and I say that again, at the highest level, is still pretty much impossible, as recognized by almost every DBD tournament, still putting 1,000 restrictions on the survivor side and only a few on the killer side, and still having complete blowout matches where the killer ends up with 4 hooks and 2 kills if they play really well. And in the past, people would make the argument that this didn't really matter because top tier Swifts were rare and therefore it wasn't really worth paying that much attention to. But that's changed now because this problem is starting to bleed into the general balance of the game by continuously gigabuffing every mid-tier killer. It's just complete overkill, and not only for solo queue teams, but even mid-level Swifts as well. Now, before any of you data Andes come at me, understand the data that behavior shares with the community is almost completely worthless. We have zero information on how that data is collected. It truly means nothing and is mostly used as a tool for behavior to control the narrative and paint any picture they want us to see. And that's just the truth. So realistically, this go next issue has some easy ways to be heavily mitigated and reduced dramatically, like the DC penalty did back in the day when it was added, but the overarching slippery slope of not addressing the Swift issue will continue on. It's very easy to say, well, we can't punish players for playing with their friends. That would be completely ridiculous, right? But if that's truly the case, then why can we punish literally everyone else who plays the game for it? It's kind of a weird double standard, isn't it? Like, you can't punish me for playing with my friends, but it's totally okay if everyone else suffers for it. And to just go to the extreme with this, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre has a new game mode called Rush Week. It's a 1v6 spiritual sidestep to Friday the 13th the game. In this game mode, the devs actively chose not to let people search in groups because, and I roughly quote them here, it would be too imbalanced. Isn't that crazy? The devs of TCM would rather outright ban people from playing with their friends because it's a more convenient option than trying to balance the game mode around pre-made groups. They would rather remove the option than have to deal with complaints about imbalance and ultimately risk ruining the vibe of the entire game mode with over-restrictive balancing. The devs know, whether behavior or gun, that Swift is a problem and they don't know how to address it. They're completely lost. Gun is outright removing the feature altogether because it's more convenient than trying to balance it, whereas behavior is straight up ignoring it while simultaneously trying to shadow balance it in the background. Now, do not misunderstand me. I think Swift should 100% exist. I would never want it to be removed. My issue is with this black sheep, exile, madman persona anyone in the DBD community has ascribed to them when they ask for it to just be fairly balanced, or even if they're just asking for a fair conversation about it. That's it. It's insanely unfair, and the cracks are starting to show. Like I said, the issue is bleeding out into the rest of the game. And I don't just say this for me. I think a lot of people need to try to get outside of their personal bubble and put their ears to the ground and listen to what just the normal players are having issues with in this game and think about ways that we can resolve them. Nevertheless, I am curious what you all think would reduce the go next mentality. We all know it can never be fixed 100%. Nobody is saying that's an option, but like, how would you reduce it? Let me know. And as always, thanks for watching and have a good one. Oh, sticking around for the end of the video, eh? Then why not go ahead and check out my currency system video here and see how I would fix all the issues with Swift and OP killers. Go ahead, click it. Go ahead, click it, click.